Welcome to Adventure Thinking, an intimate series of live video podcasts that explores the mindset born from challenge, adversity, and living a life of no regrets. I'm Jonesy, your host, and for the past 20 years, I have been lucky to have embarked on some crazy expeditions.
And I'm Lauren, your other host, and I haven't.
And returned transformed, with some pretty epic tales to share.
I'm more of an accidental adventurer.
You just start to question why you're doing it.
Each week, I'll be bringing adventure stories.
We'll be bringing?
And mindsets down from the proverbial mountaintop as we dive into the hearts and minds of some of the world's greatest adventurers. These are people that have achieved truly phenomenal undertakings against all odds and have returned better for it. So, do you want to live more adventurously? This is Adventure Thinking.
All right, so welcome to episode 11 of Adventure Thinking. Lauren, how are you doing?
I am here and present. It is always amazing how much of a juggle it is to sit here and to be present, but we have made it happen, albeit, I think, 5 minutes late again.
Don't ever expect us to be early. Like, honestly, don't ever expect that.
Which is a pet peeve of mine. Actually do, because being prompt is a life goal of mine, which I usually hit, but not here. Anyways, lessons learned. My lesson from last week was to sit closer to the mic. So if you see me eating the mic, that is me trying to rectify the fact that with the Jess Watson interview, I would back and forth. So that's what I'm going to work on. Justin.
You know what I'm sick of? I'm sick of actually having to reset up this equipment every single day because it's out of control.
Yeah.
It really is. Should we give everyone like a little behind the scenes?
Let's do it behind the scenes.
Actually, I'm going to try and do this. So give me a second. We'll bring in this other camera.
Just to show you that it is not all seamless. Okay. But you can still show up.
Okay, so I'm making this camera live. Hello. This is the one instead. We're not going to look at that one. Bye-bye.
Don't show our dirty laundry.
Oh, God, the dirty laundry, yeah. So here we go. So we got lights, camera, action. Ah, there's our guest. She's not submitted to be on yet. Cameras, everything, mixer, computer. It just gets a bit much. Like, seriously. So that's a little behind the scenes for everyone.
But here we are. Let's take a deep breath.
Yep, and go back to what we're meant to be looking at, which is not me, but the two of us.
And Justin, why don't you tell us who we have on today? Because I'm pretty excited. Actually, this guest was referred to us by Lucy Barnard, who we interviewed episode 3. So when we asked Lucy who she thought was an amazing person, human, an adventure thinker, she suggested we look up this guest. And if you remember, we actually played one of her stunning videos about girls going wild.
Basically, I think where the wild things play, I think it is, Lauren. Right. Where the wild things play. So that was pretty awesome. Now, so I've never actually had the opportunity to meet Krystle. So this is super, super cool. Although it's
Krystle
virtual.
Wright.
Yeah, Krystle Wright. That's their guest, as everyone has been seeing on Instagram and whatnot. And she's always been kind of in different spheres, but I've always just watched her work and just gone, I wish I could do that. I wish I could take photos like that. I wish I could tell stories like that. I mean, I can stick a camera in my face and just yarn on and prattle on and act like a fool, but there's an art to storytelling that I don't think many people have, and Krystle has that in spades. And she's doing stuff, really at the forefront of adventure with, crazy people out there. She's worked with the likes of just about everyone who's big in the industry. And I'm really excited to ask her a lot of questions. I want to ask her about Sarah Marquis' trip, actually, because that's someone I'd love to get on the show at some point in time, because I know she went out there with Sarah. But I'm going to read the little blurb that Krystle sent to us, so that because I think it's kind of poetic and nice. I like it. Driven by a passion to capture the most unique perspective not yet thought of, Krystle Wright is a pioneering photographer from Australia who is accelerating the awareness and visibility of the most extreme sports and these athletes of the world. On a continual quest, she's laughing in the background slightly so I can see that, it's putting me off. On a continual quest to challenge herself and others mentally and physically, Krystle constantly brings attention to the demanding adventures and landscapes that the public is rarely fortunate enough to be exposed to.
For me, Krystle brings goosebumps. Whenever I watch one of her clips, honestly, it's edgy, it's raw, and it's goosebumpy, which I think that's a sign of a pretty damn good storyteller.
Yeah, very goosebumpy. Her theme today is stubbornness, so I really want to dive into what that actually means. But before we bring Krystle on, we are going to jump into a 30-second edit of a recent short film of hers called Chasing Monsters about her friend Nick Moya, I think. Yeah. Moya. There we go. So we will press play. Krystle, how are you today?
Goosebumpy. Woo! Hi, Krystle.
Sorry, I'm laughing about. I'm just laughing when you read out my bio because honestly, I was like, oh, it sounds like a bit like a wank job. It's just, I hate bios.
Yeah, it's a hard thing. At least I was reading it and you weren't reading it, because that's the worst when you have to write a bio for yourself and you have to read it out for some whatever reason. But at least someone else is like blowing the smoke up your ass, well, and not you.
Look, you've done some pretty cool things, so I don't think there's any smoke necessary to just hero the cool shit that you do. So thank you for being on today. And I'm so excited because when I look at your beautiful pictures on Instagram, I kind of thought your theme might be beauty or I wasn't sure. And then I love that however we structure this, we ask the person coming on to share a story around a theme that's resonating with them at the moment or has resonated with them as they've done something really interesting in the past. And I love that you put up stubbornness because it's cool and unexpected. So can you dive into why that theme really resonates for you at the moment, or why you picked it?
Well, I would say that anyone that really knows who I am knows that I'm pretty bloody stubborn. And the thing with stubbornness, I think it's both treated, it's a good and a bad thing to have in your character. But I'd say it's probably the one thing that's probably carried me through my career. I'm stubborn that, I've got no plan B, so I have to make this career work. So that sort of stubbornness gives you drive. But on the other hand, that stubbornness will, I'll lock onto an idea and I won't let it go because I'm so stubborn about it. And I've had to learn at times when to let certain things go. So that's probably one of my bigger weaknesses.
Stubborn, yeah. No, I don't know. Is that really a weakness though? I think it's a superpower. To think about having to let go at things at times. But if you let go too early and too fast too soon, then you don't. Then you don't know what you can actually get.
Don't listen to Justin. He'd be right there with you because he ran a 100
would be a
kilometer
bad
race
team,
with
actually.
a broken leg. So I think that you guys are in the same camp of stubbornness. I, on the other hand, I think it is an admirable quality and something that I think is unique, and that is something that probably will drive you. And at times, I don't know if it'll hold you back or not. What do you think? Is it something that drives you harder than holds you back?
I'll probably say gives me more drive, but then currently at this point in time or this year, obviously we're all navigating some pretty strange times, and I had to get surgery last December, and that definitely forced me to stop. And I remember back in late February, early March, I took off, did a road trip down to New South Wales, and I was trying to get back into it and get some work going again. And I'd say that drive or that stubbornness wasn't a good thing at that time. And I'm oddly lucky with this pandemic, which I know is a bad thing to say because I don't wish upon tragedy on others, but being forced to stop proper. Because 2 months after surgery is not enough time to fully recover. But that compressed with so many years on the road. I would tell people I was basically on the road 11 months a year for the past few years, and I just hit burnout. I've actually barely picked up a camera this year, maybe a handful of times, and maybe I've taken 1 or 2 images I like, but for the most part, I just haven't been happy with it this year. And so it's interesting to not feel as much stubbornness at the moment. If anything, I feel like I'm just in this very, I don't know, sort of long-term pattern of trying to reset and try and find the energy that I used to have and figure out which direction I want to send that in.
Interesting. Is this the first time that you have taken this much time off in your career, or is it something that you try to carve out for yourself between projects? Or I know for stubborn people, I know it's hard to pull back. So have you taken this much time off before?
Oh God, no, I haven't been in this place. I haven't been on the Sunshine Coast like this since I finished university, so back in 2007. And I would say probably from 2008 to 11 when I was in Sydney, there was definitely, like each year it would slowly pick up. Like I'd do one little trip and the next thing you know, it was two. And that momentum continued to build over the next 10 years until it was, let's just say it was batshit crazy last year, which is probably an understatement. But most mates who know me knew that I was just finding, like I would talk about wanting to stop, wanting to have time, but I couldn't do it. I didn't have the control to do so because I had tried so hard to create the momentum that I actually didn't know how to stop. So I guess I needed to be forced to stop.
Do you feel when you come back to it, though, that you'll be able to go, choose your jobs a little bit more carefully? I suppose you'll be able to go, actually what? I don't want that one because I want to have that time. Do you think you're going to have that sort of that foresight when you get back to it?
I'd like to think so, because the good thing about being forced to stop, I think there's a lot of life issues that I was putting on the back burner for a long time. And until I actually stopped, I finally addressed a lot of those things, including my living situation. And so it was only 2 months ago that I managed to sneak in to the market and get myself an apartment. So I actually have my own space finally after all these years, which is huge. And I think a lot of friends actually don't know that I've done this. But it was time. Like I couldn't keep relying on friends to help me. At some point, like we're all growing up, but like, gosh, when you hit your 30s, we're all hitting these very different life paths. And I don't want to be that person who's still like, hey, can I use your spare room? I'll only be here for a little, 24 hours here, 1 week there. Because now it's like, oh, I'm around all the time. So now that I have this space, it's nice because I think it actually gives me a bit of a purpose to wanting to come home. Because before, without that space, it was easy to stay away. So it's like, well, what's the point going back when I don't have my own space? So now that I have this, I think it's a bit grounding. So ideally, as the world wakes up again, I would like to think I'm going to be able to pick and choose. But when you almost have no savings left and a mortgage, maybe I won't be able to pick as much in the beginning. Yeah.
We'll watch out for what happens post-COVID to see how busy you are. See, we'll just, if you've got a landline, you should put a landline in your house, and we'll give you a call every now and then and see if we can catch you. That'd be quite funny. Be a waste of money for you, I think. But it's romantic, though. I mean, like everyone looks at photography and go, oh, you're traveling around the world, you're on the run, you're taking photos, you live out of your backpack, you've got your cameras, and there's a huge sort of romance angle to that. But the harsh reality is, you're battling with it, you're saying, and it's just, I don't know. Can you give a handy hint to maybe some of those budding photographers that probably are trying to set themselves up so they get noticed and known, and how to actually have that work-life balance? Is there something that you can say to them? Because I know a lot of them will be listening.
It's a tricky one, because when you start, you are so hungry for that attention to your work. And if I look back, I realize how good it was in the beginning when I started travel, because I didn't have a ton of emails. I wasn't checking my email multiple times a day. I was just out there sort of combining a road trip with trying to set up projects, and I had a lot more fun with photography back then. Like I still do, it's just that it changes and it evolves in different ways. But there was definitely a lot more freedom, even though I was a lot more broke. It's interesting how much more freedom there was, and without pressures of life, like, no family, no relationship, no home. It's an amazing amount of freedom to play with. So I encourage, everyone's so hungry to be like that overnight sensation. They all want it now, like the quick fix. Like they want that career bustling now. And it's like, Well, you know Watto. He was the one that told me
Yeah.
it would take 10 years before your name is known. And I think that's a really good lesson that, yeah, let it be 10 years. You know, it's 10,000 hours to become a master. So there's no point trying to rush it, because it's, as that momentum builds, you take on more responsibility and business, and it takes away from that ultimate freedom that you have when you first start carving out your career.
Well, there's a lot of, creativity that comes in that freedom and in that space and in that uncertainty. Where do you pull? You said that you're kind of in this first place where you haven't picked up your camera and you've been feeling burnt out, and you've also been moving from a space of being a global nomad to a homeowner. Those are massive shifts. Have you where do you, I mean, that's huge. And it only took a pandemic to slow you down.
That's the only thing it took.
Or to ground you to home. Maybe it's been a good thing. But where do you typically pull your creative enlightenment or your spark? And where are you pulling it from now?
I would say I definitely dream of ideas. And I noticed last year I was on stage in Portugal, and it was great because a friend of mine, Daniel Pahuralak, was also there, and we had some really good live chats during this festival. And I spoke about on stage where, because I was running around so much last year, I actually realized my dreams had stopped. I wasn't dreaming as much at night anymore, and so it wasn't spurring on those ideas that I would usually have. But also, I typically probably get ideas from other forms of art. So I'm a massive movie lover. Anything that Christopher Nolan bloody writes, I think that guy's a genius. But then also, whether it's fine art or music, especially music, I just having this space. And when I was talking to Dan about all this, he had mentioned that he'd taken a year off prior. And I hadn't realized, particularly the absence from Instagram, because I was so used to him never posting anyways. Because the guy takes off, whether it's a couple of weeks, couple months, and produces a World Press Photo Award-winning, essay. And he said he needed a year off to just, because he's usually doing a lot of heavy work with documentary. And he said, Krystle, even if taking a year off, he's like, that wasn't enough time for him to fully recuperate. And it's tough because you've got to balance work and, life keeps happening and the bills keep coming. But it was interesting to hear him say a year's not even enough. We all think, okay, you can just fix it now. I've even had a friend at me going, Krystle, you should just go out with your camera, take walks and take photos, because even if you don't like them, at least the more shit photos you take now, the closer you'll get to taking a great photo again. But for me, that doesn't work. I just need the space just to get back into that right headset. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think even when people say, I'm going to take a couple months off, a couple months just breezes by. Gosh, even now we're already in August, and I'm actually really hoping that I have absolutely no excuse or no work reason that I'm sitting on a plane this year. I'd love to go a year without being in any airports or planes.
I like it. I listened to a TED Talk. I don't know if you've come across it, but it's called The Power of Time Off. Have you heard about that?
No, but I need to write this down.
It was beautiful. Because I'm a perfectionist, and I was always driven by busy, because busy was a determination of success, especially in the US. The busy you are, the more successful you are. So I didn't realize that kind of busyness was a mask over kind of going into these deeper feelings, and it kind of limited my creativity and my self-awareness and the power that comes from being still. And so when I saw this Power of Time Off, he's a creative. I think his name's Steven Stegmeister. The spelling is kind of tricky, but if you Google Power of Time Off on TED Talk. But he said that instead of waiting to retire and spending 15 years of retirement kind of not sharing your gifts, and you kind of close the door and then go off into the oblivion, he wanted to take those 15 years and put them kind of at powerful moments throughout his career. Ideally, every 7 years, he'd take a year off. And he said the same thing. The first year off, he learned a lot, and it wasn't enough. He needed more space. And specifically, he needed a year where he wasn't thinking about work, or he wasn't letting other people dictate his year. So he lived, I think he does a creative ad agency in New York, and he went to Bali to learn woodworking.
That's awesome.
Because it was a different art form that then transcended, and he could kind of shut off his brain from needing to figure it out and have space and time. And he said whenever he'd do these year sabbaticals, his next 7 years would be full of the creative juices that he was feeling dwindling from the previous 7 years, and the power of his work just went phenomenally. So I was like, oh, there is something in slowing down and taking a sabbatical, and there is power in time off. And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough, or we don't allow ourselves to do, because it's like you're falling off the beaten path, or you're falling behind. Especially if you spent 10 years getting your name out there. What happens in Instagram at these days? What's your thought? You spend 10 years getting your name out there, your name's out there, and you take a year off. What does that feel like? Would you do it?
Oh gosh, just listening to that, I think that I would love to actually find a year off, if not even more often, maybe one every 5 years. Yeah. And no, because that's the thing, we seem to keep encouraging, be busy, be successful, whatever that means these days. And yeah, I don't know. I'm a big believer in slowing down. I think this world needed a reset, and I'm hoping we actually do change after this pandemic. We don't just revert back to the way we were, because it's not sustainable. Yeah. So
what would you?
It's a bit like even simple day-to-day things. Like, why are we encouraged to buy cheap stuff that is meant to be thrown out, or it's disposable? Like, why is everything so goddamn disposable? Why can't we build things to quality, and there's less consumption, buy less? I don't care if we get charged more. If it means I buy it far less than the current cycle that is going, I would be a lot happier. I already seek out those things because I just don't want to shop. But I think, no, slowing down is good. For me, like the last few years, particularly being on the road all the time, man, friends would always hear me complain, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so unfit. And I gave in to, because I was always jet lagged or in a new space, I could never feel settled. And so I'd always sacrifice those sorts of things. And so finally this year, by being grounded, I actually am probably the strongest I've been in a very long time, because I actually have the chance for a routine. Like, routine can be bloody nice. Whereas, of course, everyone's like, oh, routine's the worst, it kills you, it's 9 to 5. I tell you what, though, some structure in your life is really nice to have, because when you don't have any structure and you're constantly moving, that is extremely exhausting. And being in other people's spaces all the time, it can be wonderful, but it's also taxing. So, again, it always comes back to balance. The lifestyle I've led has been amazing. I just didn't balance it. So that's why I hit to a point of burnout, is because, it was either all or nothing.
Well, it's funny because we had episode a couple episodes ago with Brando Yelovich, and he was talking about reintegration. And it's same thing. It's like when you have these very driven people chasing their passions, oftentimes they don't stop. And when they are forced to, or when an expedition ends, because he's an adventurer, when an expedition ends, there's something called post-expedition depression, because the world goes quiet, but you're not focused on your thing. And he always chased the next expedition, and it almost became another form of addiction. So he's forced himself to not have another expedition, to slow down. And he was talking about kind of the power in creating that space to be in routine, to have home, because he, was always searching for the next thing. So it sounds like that's something that you've been chasing as well, or it's something that we all needed that we didn't know we needed, perhaps.
Oh, definitely. It's interesting because I also read this conversation someone talked about, and when you were growing up, or for us, being a kid in the 90s, and I remember like certain films, like say 7 Years in Tibet, and when you see a film like that, you just think, oh my God, that's so exotic, and I would, love to travel there one day. And these days, when someone says, "Oh gosh, I've got some time at home, going to be there for a couple of months," and then people's eyes light up at that, going, "Oh my God, you get to be home," that suddenly becomes the exotic Tibet. So it's like as travel became so accessible that we find the magic in just being home, because that seems to be the utopia we're chasing.
When you do travel, I've been on the road for 11 months of a year, like prior to this year, obviously. How did you find that home? Did you take because home for me is not necessarily a place, it's a feeling, it's a sense, How did you, was there a way that you took that with you, even though you're away, that you found some way to be settled on the run?
Yeah, there's a few close friends that have taken me in over the years, and being with them, it's pretty hard to hit this balance, but a couple of friends where I feel like when I stay with them, I'm not on eggshells.
Yeah.
I'm 100% who I am with them, and if they have animals, even better, because I fucking love animals. But so yeah, there was definitely a few havens throughout the year that I could retreat to, but for the most part, I think I just always made sure I had music to escape to on the move, and hopefully a good book to read, or lose myself in a few movies. But there were certain activities I could do on the go. But last year was just insane. I remember by the time I was flying back from Portugal, and I was trying to get home in time for the surgery, because I definitely once again crammed everything in, and it was a nightmare flight back. I was coming out of Bilbao, and my first flight was massively delayed. So when I got into Madrid, and if you've been through Madrid, it's a massive airport, and I got in, I had 20 minutes to make my flight. So I'm sprinting through the airport, managed to get there in time and think, okay, it's all good, it's all home run, because I only had 1 day spare at home before my surgery. So a bit of an idiot move from me. Anyways, send the plane Madrid, and next thing we get massively delayed again. And so when I get to Abu Dhabi, same scenario. I get off and I've got like 20 minutes to get from one airport to the other. And by then, I just hated anyone and everyone. I hated everything. And that's when I was like, this is a very clear sign. I don't need to travel for a while, at least not in that mode of planes.
Is it something that
I wasn't.
You get energized by? Because it's funny, Justin and I have these conversations all the time. Like, he's probably your traditional adventurer where he is motivated.
I don't think I'm traditional at all.
What?
I don't think I'm traditional at all, actually. I'm going to disagree with that.
I think you have similarities to Krystle, where like you pack everything in because there's a million things and you can do it, but there's a stress around it. However, you seem to get some benefit from that stress, versus I'm someone that really needs to manage that anxiety. And for me, the shadow side of adventure is too much uncertainty and anxiety, and I really need to ground into home. Why do you push yourself? Like in the does that make sense? I
You
know
say
I'm
that to
kind
me
of
or Krystle? Because I'm
both of you, because I'm trying to understand, because there's something about being stubborn and being high performing and going and going and going that creates amazing humans. But there is also something about and that you get energy off of it. I don't even know what I'm asking.
I think I know what you're saying, that there is a certain energy that comes from it. However, over the years of traveling, I remember when I first started going to the States, I bought myself this dodgy vehicle in LA through some dodgy people. And when I left LA, a lot of dodgy. And when I left, I remember the stress I would have of going, I have absolutely no idea where I'm sleeping tonight. I have no plans, there was excitement in that, because it was the first time I felt like that in a long time, just that unknown. But definitely for quite a few months, most of the time, every morning, it's like, I have no idea where I'm going to sleep tonight. I just had no plans. And there was definitely, it got tiring to a certain point, because, I've had a few cops knock on the window of my car telling me to move on, or making sure I wasn't dead inside or something stupid like that. And then over time, obviously, I built a community of people who would take me in. But I guess over time I learned through that was that I stopped stressing about those little things. So even when I'm traveling and flying, there's actually a lot I don't stress about because a lot of it's out of my control. So why worry about, like if a plane lands late and it's not my fault, I'm obviously going to be taken care of. And so you just go with the flow.
Yeah.
So I feel like, there's that. But I would much, much prefer to be outside, like that expedition that I did in Baffin Island, camping on a frozen fjord for a month with all those base jumpers, or traveling through Pakistan and documenting paragliding, or freediving off, the Azores in the Atlantic trying to find sperm whales. I much prefer those situations. I love it when Mother Nature takes control all the time, but I just love being inserted into those situations and dealing with that sort of stress, because I think that's a good stress
100%
versus man-made.
The stress from nature, I mean, like when you're on her clock, it's a different feel. I mean, like you're a feather in the eye of a maelstrom. You can't compete with that. So you've got to adapt. Whereas with if it's a human stress, then you feel like that you should be able to manipulate it. You should be able to force your will, and I don't think it's a very good way to be. Because one thing that I don't trust, being a person that likes the outdoors, there's an unknown element to humans that is a flip side that's really dark, and sometimes it's a thing you can't really mitigate, which is scary. But I think what Lauren was touching on before is like you and I think we need to feel that pressure. We need to feel that pressure. Even just emailing you before this, and you were like, "Yeah, I do everything last minute," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the same way."
I'm like,
it forces you to perform. I think. But how does that work with photography? If someone's jumping off a cliff, let's go to Baffin Island for a moment. Someone's jumping off a cliff. They're base jumping, wingsuiting, whatever they're doing. You don't have the ability, the chance, to fuck up. Like you've got to come back with the goods. So that stress there, it's an internal stress, or is it an external stress? Where does that come from for you? Like how does your head process that?
I would say, I wing it. The amount of shoots I've done, I don't check the weather, and it's like, of course it's storming. Like,
it's more atmospheric.
Good job, Krystle.
It's good.
Yeah. But it's shocking how little planning I do around Mother Nature. I do try to figure out the right season and stuff, but so often I'm just like, yeah, no, fuck it, I'll just go out. It'll be right. And so often it's not right. It's actually a clusterfuck. But it's,
and what kind of pictures have come out of the clusterfuck? Are they some of your best, or like what is it about the clusterfuck that what has come out of that? I'd say there's a few good ones. There's a few good ones for sure, but then there's also a whole lot of times where I can look back on trips and I don't have a single image that sits in my folio. It just sits on a hard drive rotting away. So. But that's the thing with, like, I guess social media. A lot of people, they sort of give this perception that every time they go out, it's just bloody magical. And that's not the case. And it's tough because if you want to talk about failures and such, then you are faced with you're crying for attention or something. And that's not the case. You're trying to be transparent. But then, wait, I've got to look up this term because I used it a few posts ago now. Like, I believe in transparency and vulnerability, but then the problem is, where did I put this post? Sorry, give me one second.
No, that's completely fine. Because it's giving me time to find something, because I'm going to ask you about as well.
But, because it's caused a bit of a stir. I definitely pissed off a few people, which is great.
Oh, fantastic. That's how you know you're making an impact.
Now it's pissing me off. I can't. Oh, is it this one? Nope. See, I can't remember what I do. Well, clearly that was older than I realized. Well, anyways, put it this way. What the term gets at is that so often now is that people commercialize transparency. So you get the classic, here's a selfie shot. Now I'm going to do this big, deep emotional story, and then, hashtag sponsored, hashtag ad at this person. And so it's so tough because you want to be transparent, but then if you're tying that in with something, it sort of loses that value because now you're trying to, relate to someone and sell a product. And I'm guilty of this too. I'm sure a couple of my posts, people could easily dissect it and go, Krystle, you just did the exact same thing. And at the end of the day, we're just all trying to figure it out. We're all trying to navigate this the best way that we can. But I don't know. I dream about Fight Club and just wish it all implode.
So you're liking this pandemic then? You're liking this disruption.
It's like a storm
like
you're going
all
straight
the Instagrammers are taking photos of their bums at home. You know, that's basically what they're doing. It's the world's shifted. It's just a random thing to say, Justin. I do want to ask you about this photo. This is the one I was using that time to find. Sorry, it's covering your face right now. Let me put it to one side. That one there.
Let's put it right on there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's from the Baffin trip, yeah?
Yep.
How do you is that
That's probably one of
Sorry?
I was just going to say it's probably one of my all-time favorite images.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you, how do you know? Like, because I heard on an interview you did a little while ago, you were talking about this photo, and you're like, that's, you know, I knew that was the shot, you know? You're taking that, I think, relatively early in the trip, and you had all this time there still, but you knew that was the one. And, like, I mean, how do you know that you're not going to do better? Like, do you just have a sense? Getting that perfect photo, how do you do that? What's that process like? I'm not a photographer. I use a camera to capture a scene, but I don't think about it or I don't feel it like you do. How do you know?
I remember that day. It was only day 3 of the expedition. So day 3 out of a month. And gosh, we had it so good those first 2 weeks. I sort of kicked myself that I'm actually not the best person in the cold. I definitely succumb to like, oh, it's too cold. I can't do anything right now. And that trip was a real struggle because for me, when my bones feel cold, I really, really struggle to regenerate energy. And then my fix is like, oh, I just go have a hot shower and burn my skin and wake the body up. And I was like, oh yeah, there is no shower. I would stuff every piece of clothing I had into a -40 sleeping bag and still be cold. So that trip was certainly a good challenge. But that day it was like I'd gone in, we were a group of 24 people, I think. So we'd gone in 2 groups of 12 just for logistics and being able to, you know, be all transported in on the back of Chemetex to with Inuits to this fjord. And so we spent like 2 days setting up, and then day 3 we just had this beautiful day and we head up. And they split up into 3 groups just so it wasn't a complete mayhem on the exit. And I remember the first 2 groups, so say 14 people, I had shot that from the other side. It was because it was easy, it was safe, it was silhouette, classic formula. But as they kept jumping, I was like, what are you doing, Krystle? Like, you've easily got a shot from this angle. You should definitely do something different. So I go around to the other side. I sort of hiked around this big bowl, and I'm sitting on this rock. And this was actually the last jumper of the day. And every composition I had before this jumper, it was just wasn't quite right. And I took this image, and I think at the time I definitely knew it was special. And then when I got down, I don't know, I just the moment just resonated with me, where I was like, those clouds coming in, that light, just everything about it, you just knew it was really bloody special. And it's interesting because, of course, when you look behind, you see all those huge mountains in the distance, and we had a month there to explore and discover and see what could happen. For some reason, I just knew that I wasn't going to top this afternoon.
It's a gorgeous photo.
What, in terms of, you know, to touch back on what you were saying with Instagram and finding that post, and, you know, there's so much effort thought on how people are going to perceive something and the likes you might receive from it. In today's, at least, you know, on teenagers will take down pictures if they don't have thousands of likes. So I can only imagine what it's like, you know, when you're a professional working in this new medium that didn't exist 10 years ago. I guess one thing I'd love to know is, what to you is the definition of success? What makes you feel successful as a photographer?
It's tricky because I'm definitely guilty of feeling that pressure from social media, and particularly Instagram. So when I first started, I probably wasted a good 1 to 2 years because I didn't take it seriously. And it wasn't until a friend was like, Krystle, people follow you not because of like you, but because of the work you do. So I think you should actually post your work. And so once I got my head around that, I remember when I first started, you felt it. You're like, I have to get the numbers. It's all about the numbers. And then in time, I've learned to let that go. And in, like, this year, I've posted maybe, I don't know if you could count on two hands maybe, but it's definitely dropped off. I used to be post once a day, but then, gosh, you just think about all that time absorbed, and then how easily, like, it could be taken away. Like, what if one day Instagram does shut down? And then you sort of think, gosh, what if I had wasted more time on that? Like, what is it actually achieving? So I can't deny the thing that does still tie me to it is primarily business reasons, where I know it's good if I want to continue any sort of sponsorships. If clients want to find my work, it still gives me that avenue, and I can't deny that. And there is positives. Like, I know I definitely talk a lot of shit about social media, but there are positives to come out of it. However, I just fear for those who just sit on it all day, every day, putting all their effort into it. That is not success. Likes does not define success. Like, you see some of the greatest photographers on that app and they can barely get 1,000 followers. So, that does not dictate their career at all. It's another avenue to maybe help accelerate or create awareness, but it does not define you as a photographer. I think the success, I remember reading this beautiful quote about a filmmaker, and he said he'd blood, sweat, and tears into putting this piece together. And one day, I think in Paris, this young lady recognized him and said, by watching your film, I realized there's such a thing as a soul. And for him, he's like, that was success. And I think that's how I like to think of success. It's being able to engage. And I would say engage because I don't need someone to think, oh my God, that's beautiful, or that inspired me, which is great too. It's even if people go, oh, I really didn't like that image, because it's still engaged with them. And at the end of the day, of course, I'm not going to reach everyone because that's just impossible due to subjectivity. But I really do think art has its purpose. We need art in our lives. And it is really nice. Like, I love it when I see a movie or I listen to music and then that night it completely stirs my mind in different ways out of my control. So, yeah.
I like that. I like that thinking of, am I engaging with people versus am I getting likes? Like, am I connecting? Because I struggle with that in terms of my creativity. I don't want to put things out as much because of fear of massive criticism. And I know that that's not the strongest thing to say, but it is. When you're working creatively, it's a very vulnerable space to open yourself up. And I think people forget that when they're behind a computer. So I think it's really important to remember what drives you and what success looks like in a world that digitally is very accessible for people to make comment without having that human connection or engagement behind it.
It's interesting, the power of the comment. Sorry, this is like stirs another thing I was listening to. So the author of Sapiens, I heard him on a podcast, and gosh, there was some really interesting thoughts. Even like actually the pros of having a dictatorship. Just because you could have a leader, say if you had a leader in power for 20 years, it gives them the ability to actually instigate change because they can think long term. Whereas when we have a politician only in power for 4 years, that's hardly any time to achieve anything. Yeah. But that's going to a whole other topic. But to get back to the comments, is that he did speak about one point how we all think that our comment matters, but it really doesn't. And I think the problem with social media, everyone is just, they're so desperate to have their voice heard. And even if it's negative, I got to ask, it's like, why do people think that that negative comment mattered? Did it actually contribute to a conversation? And I do believe in criticism, but if you have nothing to add to a conversation, why the fuck do you bother? Like, what does that achieve?
I agree with that, with Yuval Harari and his thought pattern there, but at the same token, the society is not set up in that way. Like, we listen to all those people and like they're given a voice, and you know all of a sudden it's about political correctness, and you've got to not marginalize a group, and all of a sudden debate, it's all suddenly we're all having vanilla ice cream because we don't want pink chocolate ice cream or this, that, the other, because it might offend someone.
I've got the quote for you.
Oh, here we go. Lay it on us. Lay the heavenly goodness on us.
Okay. This is great. Intellectual curiosity, let alone risk-taking, is now a liability.
Who said that?
I can't remember. I've only copied the quote, and for once I failed to copy the author.
You should have claimed it.
Say that again. Intellectual risk-taking.
No, intellectual curiosity, let alone risk-taking, is now a liability. And I think that's interesting because it's like, as I said, criticism is such an important part of the conversation. Also, having an opposing point of view, because an opposing point of view doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. But we are so obsessed and wrapped up in the idea of political correctness, I think it's actually going to stifle our ability to grow, because we need to entertain all points of the conversation. Because otherwise, how do you have even a conversation? It's almost like, I don't agree with you, so you can't express that. I'm definitely not saying that before. It's just the outright, with social media, when someone just wants to say this nasty, vile comments, that attitude I'm not for. But when it gets to more complex subjects, it's like, we need opposing points of views to discuss and figure out how to grow.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, I'm not going to use this as a positive example, but you look back at sort of World War II and certain experimentation that was done on people, but there was things that were actually taken from that. You know, a lot of those the Nazi scientists actually ended up going over to the US and actually working over in labs for the government over there. So it's a hard one. Well, I mean, deadly serious. I mean, that's the hard facts of the world that we live in. Like, that actually happened. And I'm not saying that's a good thing at all. But I mean, like, you've got to have diverse opinions, diverse thoughts to come up with a solution, because you need left of center thinking to come out of solutions. You come up, actually, well, that was a bit too far. But what if you take that concept from that person over there and apply it to this situation? It could actually work.
I think that it's more time than ever to have kind, open-minded conversations. I read Brene Brown's Into the Wilderness, I think it was her book, and it was all about how we've narrowed our communities so much because all we get fed is things that are like us. So there's all the data analysis behind social media that's only feeding you kind of back the same thoughts, or it listens to you on your phone and then feeds you what you say. So your world gets very narrowed to the point that you now can only associate with people that think the same way. But we are more desperate for connection than ever. So it's this weird conundrum where we don't know how to have conversations empathetically and openly like we used to before kind of the world was narrowed to these thought bubbles. And even news has been narrowed to thought bubbles. And is news really news? So it's an interesting book to just explore. Like, I have, my family's very Republican. I'm more Democrat, and we struggle to even have conversations even though we love each other. And her thing was kind of a willingness to go into the wild with these conversations, and how only when we can, we will be seen. And I think it goes to your point. I'm not sure if I agree with Justin with, there's some good that came out of that, because I don't think that there is any good.
I was using an example. Krystle, would you like to jump in here at this point? Because we're going to get into debate here, I think.
Oh, this is great.
Back away.
But this is conversation.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's like, it can be an uncomfortable conversation, but there's nothing wrong with having these conversations. But I think the problem with where we've gone is like reading about, I think it was the Reagan days, is that when Fox News were created. And then since his presidency, it became much more divisive, where, like, I've met some amazing Republicans in the state, particularly when I was trying to work with Protect Our Winters. And we had this big gathering, and everyone was very hard Democrat. And these two Republicans that came to speak, I wish I could recall their names, but I'm sort of stumping on that right now. They put us all in our place, because they actually had the most sort of level view of the whole situation. So I think what the power of politics and what it should be is actually bringing the best of both sides, because not one side is ever going to get completely right. But that's what it all comes down to. We're supposed to be serving community. And I think that's what we're lacking. That's why I've actually enjoyed being grounded. So it's like, bring it back to adventure, because politics is a very slippery rabbit hole these days. But even like I found, for example, I go out to this little country town west side of the highway here on the coast, and I go to this little Pilates studio. It's really, just 4 of us or 5 of us in the studio at a time, and it's so nice because it makes me feel like I'm back a part of a little community. Or even going back to the boxing gym, it's like there's a really nice sense of community, and I think that's what's missing at the end of the day, is that we're thrown all these problems all the time. It's really overwhelming. But the fact of the matter is, if we could all just care about our own backyard, I think we'd be in a lot healthier place. But we get so overwhelmed thinking we need to fix everything, we almost just stunt ourselves because you don't know where to start. But if you start in your own backyard for beginning, well, maybe it gives you a bit of just greater sense of connection and purpose.
Well, I think that's really interesting, because for me, photography has helped me realize that our own backyards are not that dissimilar to somebody's, somebody who lives in, say, Afghanistan's own backyard. And I have a friend, Andrew Quilty, who is a photographer, and he lives in Afghanistan. Do you know him?
I know Quilts.
Yeah, so I haven't seen him since he's kind of gone over there, but I follow him, knowing him before and then following his work. He opens up such a beautiful view of the backyard of Afghanistan, and then has a beautiful story kind of behind what's happening. Just, these kids, this is the ice cream truck, and this is, it's Independence Day for a national whatever. And through his lens, I can see that everybody is not too different. But growing up, in a politicized environment, it's like, oh, well, Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan and, the US, and they're pitted against each other. But through his lens, I can see that we are not that dissimilar, even though we are different. So I think it's kind of creating that common backyard, even though our houses might be different. But for me, that through the lens of beautiful photographers, or through your lens, I can do the wild things that maybe I don't do myself. And I think that that's the power of bringing people together through art form. And I think photography is very unique in that, for me, at least.
Yeah, there's certainly like certain situations, like right now with all the Chinese vessels floating off the protection waters of the Galapagos. There's quite a bit of noise being created, and had it not been for social media, I certainly would have no awareness of that. So there is, again, I think with everything, and I know I can get very opinionated, but I like to think I'm also aware that I know I'm wrong, probably a lot, but there's pros and cons to everything.
Are you too stubborn to admit when you're wrong, though, in an argument? Going back to stubbornness for a second?
Depends how many beers I've had.
Okay. You are sponsored by a beer company, so there we go. Maybe that's an issue.
No, it's I'm definitely stubborn. I remember in Tasmania a couple of years ago, I was at this photo festival, and I got very opinionated. I still carry these opinions about the AIPPs, which I don't know if it's still going, or the APAs, sorry, no, it's the APAs, that's the awards. I've definitely had some very strong opinions about that. So anyways, I'm in this conversation with a few friends, and I get very animated. Anyway, someone stops me, and they're like, Krystle, this is Tony, and do you know who Tony is? I'm like, no, who are you, Tony? Well, he's the guy who helps run the AIPP and then the APAs, which for those who don't know is the Australian Institute of Professional Photographers, and then the APAs were their annual competition. And I took a moment, and I was like, all right, Tony, here's what I think. I continued on. I didn't back off. And it was nice, because then he's like, well, Krystle, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm now going to tell you my point of view. And it was really enlightening, because I definitely had failed to even really think about some of the stuff he was faced with and why certain things had evolved the way they did with the competition. And then I was like, okay, now I have a better understanding. But I think we had a much more instant respect for each other, because I can't stand it when people actually, I was listening to this great podcast. I really enjoy Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And he was talking to Steve Coogan, who talks about salivating in the awkward moments. And so he would talk to someone and they might say, oh, I hated that movie. He's like, oh, I actually produced that movie. And then the person immediately standing there trying to backtrack, going, oh, no, it wasn't that bad. And I hate when people change. It's like, no, stay to your opinion, because it's way more entertaining too. You don't have to like everything.
What characteristic is it in you, do you think, that allows you to, stay so strong in who you are? Have you always kind of had that very defined sense of self, or is that something you've picked up along the way? And they always say in your 30s and 40s you give a lot less F's to people, and you wish you had said more, or you'd wish you had said no. But for me, that's been an evolved process. I think I've really struggled to do that as much as I've wanted to do in my life. Has that something you've always had, or something you've acquired along the way? It's hard to stand
I
in
would
who
say
you
it's certainly
are.
I'd say it's certainly evolved. I remember catching up with an old high school friend in Seattle, because she was living over there and I was passing through, and she mentioned, she goes, God, Krystle, back in high school we thought you were very quiet and shy. And I was like, if I look back in high school, I didn't think I was shy. I certainly maybe kept to myself a little bit, but I thought I was, I don't know, pretty normal kid. I know I had a lot of, not insecurities. I was really nervous in the beginning about approaching people. The first time I met Adam Pretty, who was my absolute idol and why I got into photography, I saw him at a World Press photo function, and I was 19 at the time. And I'd gone down with my mum, just doing a one-night trip to Sydney. And when you see someone's photo on the internet and then you actually see them in person and you keep thinking, is that actually them, or am I just mixing them up? So anyways, I probably stalked him for a good hour around this room, and I had my little printed folio in my arms, and then my mum's cracking the shits because she's like, Chris, I just want to get dinner. Like, you either do this or we're going. And it was good that I had that push, because I finally went up, introduced who I was, and he was so incredibly kind, and he gave me some very honest feedback on the spot about my work. It was great because it wasn't filtered. Like, he would tell me, like, oh, look, I don't like this image, but this is why. He'd give me reasons why. And I never felt so motivated after that to take on his advice. And so I guess over the years I've learned how to definitely just approach people out of the blue. I would say if friends take me to a party and I just don't know anyone, I get really introverted. There are times where, even at weddings, I'm very often the exotic friend where people are like, how are you friends with this person? Because of, our unique circumstances. And I get really tired in those situations because I hate when people don't know how to instigate conversation. It's the same safe questions every time. So I'd rather just drink in the corner and just watch people. But then other times, if I know a few people, yeah, great. I can definitely be very animated and have a good old time. But I wouldn't say I'm always, I guess that throws people sometimes. Sometimes I feel very, I go into a bit of a shell, and then I just don't want to, be around people. But then other times, I can definitely be having too many shots of tequila at the bar and telling, the most spectacular failure dating stories.
Excellent. No, that's good. I think that's a great way to get people interested in you for sure.
So we just need a couple shots. What is the most spectacular failing dating stories? Do you want to share one? Come on.
Oh, here we go.
That's appropriate. Okay, this one's a real kick in the guts. So a couple years back, and this is great actually. So I'll give another
I'm gonna settle in.
Lead into the story. So
we had a beer for a shot.
I was where was I? Last year, I think I was at a photo festival in Mammoth, and it's really funny hanging out with a bunch of friends like this. Corey Rich, I think who else was there? Savannah Cummins, who else is at the? Christian Pondella. Yeah, a bunch of us. Anyways, Pete McBride was there too. Anyways, he had an old flame come into town, so they went to dinner. And what I didn't know, Pete was texting Corey, being like, rescue me, the conversation's dying. And by then I've had a few good drinks in me. So we all, like, there's a party of 6 of us that go and crash his date. And I sit down, as I said, a couple of drinks in me, and then I'm like, all right, I'll be the entertainment.
Let's do this.
So I was like, let me tell you a story now. And so at Telluride Mountain Film Festival a couple of years ago, a friend of mine actually set me up with her brother. And we actually kicked things off. Like, there was a great romance there. And for the first time, afterwards, we were actually talking almost every day. And it was one of the first times I didn't feel like I was stifled, like someone was trying to check in on me. It was actually a really nice conversation. So anyways, it gets to about 2 months, and I think, hey, we need to find a way to meet up, because either it's just going to fizzle out naturally, or we can go meet up somewhere and just figure it out. Is this actually something to pursue, or do we just say la vie? So I get into my head where it's like, I'm doing well financially at that point. How about, I'm doing this job in Tahiti. I knew he was financially strapped at the time. So I said, I'm willing to take a chance where I will buy you a ticket. You can piggyback on my trip. Let's go spend a week in Moorea, and then we'll do a week in Chopu so I can do this job. And it's pretty easy. I'm like, you come over, you have a bunch of great sex, and if we don't get along, we can go high five, thanks for the good times, see you later. Or you figure out, hey, things went well, let's figure out the next step. And of course, as I tell the story, both Corey Rich and Pete McBride are just like, Krystle, where were you when we were 20, 30 years old? Like, this is the dream girl move.
Dream date.
Dream date. I mean, it's pretty easy. How do you fuck that up? When someone buys you a ticket to Tahiti and is very clear of like, it's okay if it doesn't work out. At least make it a fun trip. No. Basically, the very first night, we walked back from this Chinese restaurant, and I had spoke about, actually, Watto, I was having a conversation Watto and I had, and he was telling me how I should be completely unapologetic about who I am, because how are you ever going to get into the right relationship unless you are 100% true to yourself?
Any of us from Watto.
Anyways, next thing I know, he uses that conversation against me. This is the first night, remember? And basically breaks up. Well, not that we're in a relationship, but basically dumps me, but then proceeded to stay for the next 2 weeks, creating a very awkward scenario. And I had also, it took me about a week to actually let go of the hope, because I came into the trip willing to explore the opportunity, willing to explore the potential if there was something there. But what I realized is that he had made his mind up before the trip and still decided to come on the trip and thought that was the right thing to do to break up in person, whereas I would have saved a shitload of money if he hadn't come along for the piggyback. And I just said to him, I was like, why didn't you just leave it to the end of the trip? He's like, oh, no, I just had to. I was like, you're an idiot. So that one was a real kick in the guts, actually. I think for a few days after that trip ended, I was definitely waking up in tears, because it hurt. Like, it was one of those, it hits you in the chest and you feel like there's a huge hole in your chest. And it just hurt because he didn't allow the chance to actually explore, like, even, to figure out if there was any chance of a potential. He'd already changed his mind without communicating to me prior to the trip. And that's happened to me a second time. Tahiti
again?
I didn't buy that person a ticket. No, it was actually Hawaii.
Oh,
jeez. I didn't buy that person a ticket. I will never buy a guy a ticket ever again.
Okay, pro tip, I reckon go somewhere cold. At least the snuggling will happen, Like, surely. Tropics, oh dear. That's so awkward. Sorry.
Yeah, incredibly awkward. And then, of course, the friend was trying to defend him, and I was like, you need to shut up right now. There is nothing you can do or say to fix this. And the funny thing is that the filmer that I was working with, Ben Stegalewski, it's funny because he couldn't stand the guy, but he's now dating his sister, and they're in a long-term relationship.
Oh, that's...
So he's
hilarious.
So he's a fan. Yeah. So he's.
So of course, So, of course, if I had a couple drinks in me and I'm telling that story, I get way more animated than that.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, I can see why you would be fired up after that. It is funny, though, when you have that perception of how something's going to go and you have that vision and then the reality doesn't match up. It's, yeah. We had, it's not a fun thing, especially when, you're such an amazing human that you deserve the best. I think they always say it's a season, a reason, or a lifetime. So I don't know what that experience was, but I always am like, okay, that was just a season, or that guy was just a reason to tell me I will never buy a airline ticket for.
I'm just really angry for your behalf. Like, honestly, this guy comes, he's probably like living it up like during the day, and then he comes back and like it's so awkward. And I don't know, it's really.
It sounds like the perfect date to me. So, whenever, if you ever need to have a date, just.
Okay, I think Lauren's just invited her out for a date, so I don't know what this says about our state of our marriage.
A brilliant photographer on, an island.
Okay.
I'm married, though.
Yeah. Although you sound so happy about that, Lauren. Good on you.
I do realize what. We've gone over time.
We have gone over time, so I mean,
and we've been really going around in circles. I definitely think that this has been one of those unique conversations that has gone off the.
I don't have much of a filter. I just tend to.
Best way to be.
I think if I was to try to kind of sum up this conversation, I think the stubbornness is what I'm hearing is kind of like. There's these kind of lights and darks of every scenario. And I think, the stubbornness drives people to kind of go out and make a name for themselves. And that there is that, excitement and growth within adventure. But on the flip side or the shadow side, it's, there's burnout and there needs to be space and there needs to be a homecoming wherever that is. And potentially, if you are out on the road, you found that homecoming either in that retreat, in music, in friends, in the outdoors. However, for the first time in the world, or the first time in your adult life, you found home in four walls and in some plants, as we talked about, and in space. And I think for me, that yin and yang of masculine and going hard and maybe feminine in the power of going soft is something that I've really enjoyed swinging between in this conversation. And how do you kind of define success and put yourself out there in this vulnerable space of online this one's a hard one to sum up. In this online world where people are so ready to kind of hide behind a computer, yet we're seeking connection more than ever. I feel like that this whole conversation has been about...
It's a push and a pull.
Yeah, it's a push and a pull. There's not... It's finding a balance between these things, and also finding a balance between creativity and work, or finding a balance between adventure and home, and finding a balance between saying the wrong thing and making sure to say the thing that's true to you. I think that's it. It's this push and pull of finding the middle authentically. And that's not always...
Yeah, for me, it's clear. Like finding that point of center. You come back to you oscillate, and then just finding where that there's a point of stasis that you kind of need before you can venture out.
But I think space was a key word. At the moment, finding space, because stubbornness can sometimes eke out those moments, and finding space to be creative. So for you, in your new home, what are some of the things that you're enjoying now since you've put down your camera, you said, for the first time in a while? What's filling you up?
Well, I'd say it's just having the routine, having some structure, being held accountable, going to these classes, because like after the surgery, they had to cut through my core. And so this year has been about rebuilding the core strength and realigning the body. Like I've been seeing this chiropractor almost every 2 weeks now for the last few months, and because he does a lot of needling. And when he first saw me, that first treatment, he asked me, he's like, what do you think's wrong with you? I was like, mate, you've already figured that out. I don't need to tell you, but I know I'm messed up. There's no like specific injury or accident, or I've come to you knowing that my body is just a mess. And yeah, it's been a doozy to fix. Because like from that first appointment, it was like a complete rotated sacrum, which of course had rotated everything else out of place. And then with the needling, just trying to release, particularly my hips, I think, from all the flying has been a lot to fix. But otherwise, I'm turning into a crazy plant lady. But I have every intention of turning this place into a jungle. Sorry, I'm looking at my giant fern right beside me. I love that thing. But
they do say
turning this into.
They do say that you hold a lot of emotion in your hips. Have you heard that? So if you have tight hips,
yes,
that's where you like hold that emotion that you might have been.
Well, there's actually the way our body holds emotion, it changes throughout the body. So when he was trying to get into my stomach, which I hate someone massaging my stomach. It's the worst.
Someone touching my stomach.
It's the worst.
I don't know.
Yep, I hate it too. And he gets right in there. He just doesn't take no for an answer. And like, first I figured out I was carrying parasites because after all these years of travel, and I've had some pretty bad food poisoning along the way.
Yep.
Is that I've taken my Wormley tablets over the years because you think, oh, yeah, just take a couple of tablets, you're good to go. But Matt said to me, he's like, Krystle, you do realize you got to do like a course of like 21 days. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you for sure have got parasites then. And he was right. I had to take this homeopathic stuff for 21 days, and I could see the difference because at first it was just like rock hard, not that I had abs, and now it's nice and soft that he can actually get into the muscle. And we talked about the emotions that associate with the stomach, and it was more not just anger, but like a stubborn anger. And that's where stubbornness, I think, lets me down, because I try to be very aware if there's one or two people in this world that I thought I held a grudge against, but I've learned to reconcile those emotions. But it's a tough one. So I think stubbornness, sometimes I can, dig my heels in on things where I need to obviously not do so. But then we talked about, like through the hips, through my legs. I think how you store emotion in your body, it changes all over.
It's true. Yeah, and you're not even aware of that until you slow down and you start to work on it, and then it's like peeling back these layers of an onion, and you're like, how deep does this thing go? However, when you can kind of work through those things, I think it unlocks a new level of self-awareness, which then can unlock a new level of whatever the next phase of your life, you know?
Yeah, and the other thing too I was going to add before with what you're saying is that just trying to find, I don't know, good nuggets, I guess, in this conversation to to relate to the audience. But the one thing I would bring up, and sometimes when I brought this up, people don't know how to interpret this, but being female and being strong, I think sometimes is misinterpreted as, oh, well, she's strong, we can just shit on her. As in, whether it's just
she can
casual
take
banter or, and that's tough, because even when I have communicated this to the odd guy friend, they're just like, oh yeah, haha. I was like, no, I'm actually being sincere. Like, there are some days, like there's certain friends who are close to me, we give each other a lot of shit because there is that love and respect. But then there are some points where there's one friend, he is recognized when he goes too far and knows when to stop. But it's tough because as a tough female, you sort of get misinterpreted as, oh yeah, well she can just deal with it, and it's not that easy. It builds up and it's hard over the years. And even as one friend was saying, like, he likes to tell his daughter that it's all good, she'll tell anyone else, like anyone, to fuck off. And that actually brought me to tears, because I said to him, I appreciate what you're saying to your daughter, and I get it, because that's probably a similar way that I was brought up as well. But sometimes in certain situations it's actually not enough, and it's really hard. So, there's I don't know. It's a tricky one. I don't want to get that point out there just because it's not always talked about.
I think that's those two sides again. It's that yin and yang. You know, you can be, you have that strong, to be a strong woman, it doesn't mean that you are not impermeable. And you also have that, that softer side. And I mean, humans have both of it, you know. I think it's something that, just like I said, I struggled to put myself creatively out there. Even doing this podcast, like I struggled to get out of my own way because of criticism, even though I think that I am a strong person. But I feel it and I have to walk through it. And people have a lot more of a forum to say whatever they want. We were talking to Lucy, actually, Barnard, and she said the biggest thing that I've learned, because she's such a strong woman, is to only listen to the people in my arena or who have been in the arena and are, you know, are fighting and learning and failing and growing and fucking up. And, you know, those are the people I listen to. Everybody else I've had to shut out consciously because it's just too much input and I feel it and it wastes my time. But I will listen to the people that I know, you know, are in that arena and trying their best to do what's important to them. And I've tried to remember that.
I felt bad because she approached me to try to collaborate with her. And it's hard. The one lesson I've had to learn recently too is realizing I don't have the capacity to always be involved in everyone's projects that approach me. And I was trying to give her advice where I was like, you got to be so careful when you do involve like a media angle that it doesn't overtake the purpose of your project. That I'm really hoping that she's found that balance to her project where I think her story needs to be told. I think it's beautiful and unique and inspirational. But at the same time, I hope she's been taking the space to make sure she's enjoyed the journey for herself. Because that's, gosh, you guys know what that's like. It's amazing how certain projects get out of your control.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal project, full stop. But just trying to retell that story and share it with a greater platform and people, it's hard in itself. And I say this, so many of my friends say this as well. That journey, probably more than anything, is something that we're so jealous of. It's just awesome. It's huge. It's epic, and it's a way of life. It's not just a trip. It's not just an expedition. That's multiple years, and it's beautiful. So I hope that does get really out there, and hopefully we can promote it as much as we possibly can as well.
I think that's a good reminder for everybody in life, is to not lose that joy in trying to execute the product.
Sorry, so this comment just popped up on Facebook that's hilarious that I think I have to share with everyone.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
This is Matt Murphy about the dating. That's a bad dating experience. Love to meet and date Krystle and promise I'd buy my own air ticket to the sunny from Sydney. Oh, Sunshine Coast as well, from Sydney. She's stubborn, smart, strong, sassy, opinionated, left-leaning, drinks beer, and most importantly, says it like it is. Hook me up, Jonesy and Lauren. Anyway.
That's why I have a girl crush on you, too. I agree.
Oh my God.
Look, I love how
amazing. You're
strong. I love how you're fucking creative. I love how you're, like you seem to I struggle with, pushing and resting and being relentless and pulling back. And I love the way that you have created your life. And I love that you're sitting in it as well. And I love that you bought your own home, yet you're a world nomad. And I love watching how you, it's been really lovely to understand how you see the world and create a fantastic life, and how you kind of are experiencing stepping out and stepping back and doing these amazing things. And then, like expressing vulnerability, like even when a really, date goes horribly wrong, expressing that it, you feel it versus just being like, I don't care.
Trust me, I have plenty more of those stories, but the others have other details that it's like, this is, say one of them involved where I had to shut down my Airbnb account. Well, I might as well tell the reason why, because basically this guy decided to piss on the floor.
So can you say that again?
Cool.
This is a date?
The guy, he pissed on the floor, the bedroom floor.
Was he like, cool. Was he there in his head at the time?
Is that a mating ritual of like?
Don't know. It was definitely like it was like, oh, I'm sleepwalking. I'm like, I think you're just more drunk and stoned than I could have realized.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool.
I see.
So you can imagine the Airbnb review went down like a treat because it was in my name. So that was fun to shut down, start again.
But not that we're talking about pissing stories, but a friend of mine, he had a situation
It's been
where...
the most random podcast I swear we should be drunk. Like, we should have wine and beer. Maybe we'll do this again.
Well, yeah, this should be a late night one. Maybe we should do adventure thinking late. And he actually is a sleepwalker, and he was urinating. Well, actually, he was drunk as well, so probably a bit of both. But he was urinating in the closet. Opened up and was pissing in the closet, and his girlfriend at the time put his head into it. It was like rubbed his head into the floor. Basically, it was just like treating him like a dog, basically. And I think that's the right thing to do. And it's like, look what you're doing. A couple of little things like Cindy Hurd has just jumped in and said, "You got to write a book." I think wholeheartedly agree with that. There was a comment earlier before from Morgan Cardiff saying it was a super interesting chat. Everything, the evolution, everything about balance, probably about the urination as well. Urinating. He probably enjoyed that as well. It's a funny chat. But
the thing is, like, well, sorry, it's like one thing I like to say to people is that no matter who you look up to, I believe everyone is a shit show. You look at people and you think, oh my God, that person has got it all figured out. Look at their life. And I can guarantee you it's a shit show. No one's got it together. We're all messy. And that's why I probably like my conversations when I just wing it, because that's how life is. It's messy.
No, I rate this. Sorry to cut you off, Lauren. No. I rate this because one thing that I was going to ask you is because people, you have a public persona, you have this name, people have this thought pattern of who you are as a human being. Oh, that's Krystle Wright, and then how do you sometimes match up the reality of people's expectations versus who you are? Do you battle with people and like when you go to those film festivals, when you go to the photo festivals, do you battle with that, or people go, yeah, okay, I wasn't expecting that experience? I'm like, how does it go for you?
Why has this happened to you before, Justin? When you, I feel like you're asking for a friend.
Yeah, I'm asking for a friend. No, yes, 100%. I'm one of the least most impressive people you can meet in real life, and people come up to me like, I thought you'd be taller, or I thought you'd be this, or I thought you'd be that. I'm like, no, I'm just me.
Oh God, I did that to a photographer. The first time I met Corey Richards at Banff Mountain Film Festival. Yep. Again, had a couple of drinks in me, and I didn't even say hello, nothing. I was like, I thought you'd be taller. He's just like,
oh.
What? That's all I said. I was like, and then just walked off.
Because Corey Richards is tall. Corey Richards is short. Yeah, Corey Richards tall.
Both of them are short.
Are they? I thought Corey Richards.
Both
I'm
short.
doing the same thing now.
Hey,
for some reason.
Let's not be a heightist.
Both short.
Justin
Oh, okay.
Jones.
My wife is. Sorry.
Corey Rich is a short ass, and he knows it.
Okay.
And I love Corey. He's great.
Right.
And the other Corey Richards, the one who's usually doing
Cold
Mount
and all
Everest
that, yep.
bloody stuff. He's short too.
Yeah. No, well, I hung out with him in Wanaka, that film festival there, and I didn't say that to him, so I feel like that was an opportunity missed. But we shouldn't be heightist because Lauren is significantly taller than me. She's got a good 2.5-3 inches on me, so it's all right.
That was the first thing Justin asked me is when we first met, he was standing on a step. And we kind of he was.
That's the only reason we're together is because I was on a step and I was taller than Lauren initially, and then we had our first interaction there, and then I stepped off the step and I saw the light just die in her eyes, and I had to revive it. I saw that moment, and now we got 2 kids.
Yeah, no, he asked me if I was a heightist, and I was like, "What does a heightist mean?" He goes, "Have you ever dated a shorter man?" And I was like,
"Heck no."
I was like, heck no, but I'm still trying to prove him wrong that I'm not a heightist. And he was like, you've just been looking up for love. You just got to look down. And here we are.
Looking in all the wrong places.
8 years later.
So I know we're going on, but there's some questions that have come in over Instagram.
I can't believe people are still listening. We've just been
I'm shocked. I actually just thought it was the three of us for most of the time chatting.
So yeah,
I'm trying.
Had a great time.
Me too. I'm trying to rein this in, but I'm just not even going to rein it in. I'm just really enjoying the randomness of this conversation.
This is balance.
I didn't even answer Justin's question.
No, you didn't.
I was like, that's what I do. It's like, I don't answer questions. I just tell random stories.
No, I think random stories are the currency of 2020. Yeah, that's what we need right now. It's the time for random stories.
And the realization that everything is a bit of a shit show right now, and that is okay. And to not be hard on ourselves.
Amen, sister. There are a couple of people who have asked legitimate questions, though, and I do want to ask them if I could. Is that cool? All right.
Yeah, it's fine.
So these are a couple of questions from a couple of mates of ours who we caught up with dinner a couple of weeks ago. One of our guests, Jeff Wilson, his son Katani is 19 years old, and he's, photographer, adventurer, and he's traveling around Australia in a van, taking photos, shooting video. And he came up with a bunch of questions. He was like, oh my word, one of my idols, ha ha ha. Well, I have a few questions. One, how did she cope with adversity as a young creative? Now, you touched on that, but just maybe just a highlight reel for that question.
Okay, here's a good story.
I love it.
So the first time I met Nick Moyer, this will explain it. Trust me. First time I met Nick Moyer, I was doing work experience at Sydney Morning Herald when I was 19, and I was way more stubborn at 19, and I just wanted to be a sports photographer. I thought I was going down the path of going to the Olympics, the Rugby World Cup. That's what I originally wanted to do. And one afternoon, I think Tim just had enough of me, because it was Tim, Steve, and Craig, who were my three mentors that week at the paper. And so one afternoon, they're like, go off with Nick and Dean Sewell, get someone else to babysit you for the afternoon. So we go off to this exhibition. They didn't have any jobs on that afternoon, so we're walking around this exhibition, and the whole time, and I'm still, I see Dean occasionally. I've become really deep friends with Nick, and I have that utmost respect for their work. But at that point, they were both being real shits to me, and the whole afternoon, all I would hear is, Krystle, sports photography sucks. Why would you want to be a sports photographer? It sucks. Like, this the whole afternoon. And I think back then I was probably a bit more quiet, didn't really say much back. And as we're going back to the office in the car, I'm still getting badgered. We're in peak hour, and I was like, I have no reason to go back to the office. So I just said, hey guys, my hotel's just a couple streets over. I'll just get out here. And I was just like, you guys, I just want to be a sports photographer, which has obviously evolved into an adventure photographer. But I'd say it's if you really do want to do something, you just make it work. Here's reality is I've had no work this year, maybe one or two jobs come in. And the fact of the matter is I've talked to my brother where if I don't get any work that comes in soon, and obviously these bills that I can't afford to miss, then I'm willing to become a labourer for 3 months just so I can have some sort of income. Mm-hmm. But other people who said, hey, well, this cleaning service need a part-time cleaner. And at the end of the day, to be a photographer, you don't have to be a full-time photographer. Even this World Press Award winner got up on stage and spoke about how he's a barista at Starbucks, and he just saves his money up and he'll go off and pursue projects around the world. And it just goes to show, if you really want to do it, you'll find any way to make it work.
I love it. I love it.
The realness of that.
That's super cool. And that actually makes me want to ask a question, or just touching on that a little bit. Your art, going out there taking photos, do you feel like you've actually, it's connected. Do you feel like you've taken the perfect photo?
What is a perfect photo?
I'm asking you, in your mind, have you sat back and go, that is something I am completely happy with, that there is. Is that something you strive for, or is that something you achieve on a yearly basis?
I hate the term perfect photo because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, perfection is an odd thing. Sorry.
Perfectionism, I think, is different from a perfect photo. Perfectionism, I believe in that because I certainly am a bit OCD, and I definitely strive for perfectionism, whereas I want to do my art well and to the best ability possible. But that doesn't lead to a so-called perfect photo. Because even when I look back on photos, as I said, that photo you showed is one of my all-time favorites. But I still wouldn't say it's the perfect photo. It's just a moment that I personally resonate with so much. And it's just a special memory. So more often than not, I think what we resonate with the most is when there is that personal story or something. There's no such thing as a perfect photo or perfect movie or perfect art. It's just someone did a really bloody good job.
Cool.
One day.
Well, my next question is not going to work on you then, because I was going to say, if there is an idea that this photo that you could take would be the symbol of perfection, you know, like the, I don't know, hands down best photo that's ever been taken, even though it's subjective, so you can't really say that. Would you be happy to have that in your portfolio for you and you alone, or would you want to share that with other people? Because it's.
I mean, no.
Sorry.
Oh no, that's all good. I mean, I share photos. I mean, I love sharing my art. Maybe there's images I have kept to myself. I mean, my website now is only 20 images. Like, I culled it down big time, because who's going to sit on there and want to look through 20 galleries? Because it was a really hard conversation, but I was like, huh. And I had the Pool Collective to thank for this, but we talked about the purpose of a website, and like, who's your target audience and why have one. And at the end of the day, for me, it was about, well, it's business. Like, I want to attract clients and continue to do projects. And if you look at a lot of photography websites, and I know this might be taken harsh, but I do think there's a bit of ego in that. If you want to put up 20 galleries, I think that sort of is showcasing the ego a bit, where you're just wanting to show off every possible great photo you've ever taken. But there's such an art in editing and selecting what you do decide to show.
I mean, so the reason why I came into this is, like, I put it in with a adventure perspective on this, and like, the truest form for adventure for me is if you go out and do a trip and you come back with it, and that's it. It's a memory for you, and you don't have to share with anyone. Yeah, and then that's the purest form. And like, yes, there is power to sharing a story in order to motivate other people to do things and to share that journey. But there's something about the idea of, and I know people that do this, they go out and do some hardcore things in the outdoors. And they don't take a camera. They don't do anything. They just take that for themselves. And I'm like, I wish I had that. I don't think I do. And that there is almost an element of perfection for me. And I will never get there.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that is, think about all the stories that we haven't heard of. It's just tough, because with photography, it's like, because it's so accessible now and everyone sees it, I sort of get a little jealous of the time where the camera wasn't noticed in a room. People didn't stop to pose. Like, people had their guards down because they didn't fully understand the camera. And so I think in time, I wouldn't write yourself off yet with that notion. I think in time, once you've got to a good place in life, because the problem is like, we have created a career out of it. So we look for ways to financially sustain that. But I think in time, I reckon, I like to think I would start to do things where, it's just stories around a campfire if you happen to be sitting there with me having a drink. And if not, then you won't hear about it.
Well, I hope we get together and have a campfire and a drink at some point soon, maybe in Sydney or maybe down in Tasmania, as we were talking about offline. Lauren, did you have I got a couple more questions here, but
I was just going to say, Krystle, you talked about, when you were 19, how you were like, I want to be a sports photographer. What is it that, I guess to Justin's point, like, what is it that drove you to that medium, both photography and sports? Is it something that, what is it that called to you? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I grew up incredibly outdoorsy, and I think for a time I had the dream to become an Olympic athlete. I was so gung-ho of wanting to chase that dream. And then after school, of course, track and field. I think if I look back, I'm like, I really should have stuck to heptathlon, but I couldn't handle. My coach said to me one day, he's like, you're always going to have your weakest event. And that brought me completely unstuck, because I couldn't handle the fact that there would always be a weakest event. And so suddenly, I think back then, what was the first thing I hated? I think shot put, because I just didn't have the body type for it. So I just sucked at that one. And then I had an accident in the hurdles, which I didn't quite recover from mentally. And then, just bit by bit, all the events started to come unstuck. And so I just stuck to long jump. And then the problem is, once you finish school, though, like, school was great. You get shuffled around by your mum to go to all these sports and music and art, and you leave high school and it's like, oh, wait a minute. Got to balance that out with the real world. So she suggested that, you take a good photo with your Kodak disposable camera, so why not study photography? Because I had nothing else going on for me, and that was it. It just all stuck. And when I saw the work of Adam Pretty, I was like, yep, that's it. That's all what I want to do.
I mean, you could still do it, the Olympics. I actually seriously looked into it 11 years ago. Me and a mate were looking into like how could we go to the Olympics, and we started actually making some progress into how do we become part of the Australian curling team, and we're calling up people and realizing there's actually a ex-Canadian mafia that kind of basically controls. Oh, they're going to call this up, and then I'm going to get in trouble here. The controls all these expat Canadians are basically the blocking out a lot of other people from entering the team because they're so bloody good, and they make all these rules up. Anyway, I digress.
Are you still going to be a curler?
I'm not going to be a curling Olympian. It was too hard, and plus those stones are really heavy.
It's not Olympic status, but the Aussie that was it North Korea, and there was some golfing championship on, and he had a jacket made up to pretend that he was like an Australian representative of golf, and he got himself into the competition because he just had wherever he was, got a tailor to make up the uniform and just walked into this competition. And it took them about a day to figure out he wasn't a pro golfer. But I was like, I love people who do that.
Yeah, there was. I remember that. Yeah, he could just apply, and he lied. He just applied and lied, and then wandered on. And they were like, "You're a terrible gopher. What's going on?" I think Sam Smoothie has an interesting story about North Korea. If you, I don't know if you've run into him. Sort of, he's a free skier from NZ. But okay, quick questions. How do you approach a shoot? Was another one. We heard before that you don't like to check weather reports. I don't suggest that, but. Krystle, anything quickly and sum it up quickly. How would you approach a shoot?
I just wing it, apparently.
You're the one that said it, not me.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's my genuine answer. I'm like, I just wing it, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm not in response to you. That's how I tend to go with it.
All right, Kit and Jordan. That's yeah. Well, I mean, you obviously know what you're doing to wing it, because if you wing it and you don't know what you're doing.
There's a lot of self-reliance in winging it, because you're like, I know whatever scenario happens, I'll figure it out. I think that there's a lot of confidence in that.
Yeah, no, great. Okay, well,
you're more of a winger than I am.
I am a massive winger. I am a massive winger. I'm like, that's all right. I'll figure it out on the go. And what is more important, story or technique?
Story.
Yeah, 100%. That's yeah. I thought that was going to be the answer.
Story is king.
Story is king.
Story is king.
Someone once told me about filming that you can shoot it on a roll of sticky tape. Don't worry about the camera. You can shoot it on a roll of sticky tape as long as it's compelling. And I 100% agree with that. The other side I battle with is that if you didn't shoot it, it didn't happen. And that's what I really struggle with, because like I'm trying to get away from that in a sense, but also knowing.
Well, that's you struggle with the thing that we've been talking about, which there's this two sides. Like you just said, your ideal adventure is to go off and to do it without having any exposure on it. Yet that's exactly what I wanted in the Outback. Yet the filmmaker in you was like, we have to shoot it. Because one of the best things about being on an adventure is sharing it to kind of have that impact of the story. Or if other people are struggling about how to create this life that they don't need a vacation from, if you don't shoot it, it doesn't happen. And I hated being on camera. It caused us so many fights because I would love to be a photographer because I'd like to be behind the camera. I literally hate the look of my voice and face on. I'm sorry,
she
people.
Threatened to rip my dick off at one point.
2 hours, but yeah, we did, and it was a really hard thing. And then finally, but I am who I am, so I can't put on. I can't pretend I'm not an actor. So it just, if the camera's in my face, you're going to hear what I think. Yeah. But that was it added a lot of both tension and challenge to an expedition that was already challenging, just to get that captured on film.
Okay. We're gonna have to have a chat about this later, aren't we? I think.
but now we see our 1-year-old, and she's grown so much, and I'm awesome. Like, thank God we did it.
Yeah,
honestly,
it's
I will never have regrets because it's amazing that we have that on film, and that's like the best family album you could get. So I thank you for putting the camera on.
No worries, I will do that to you for the rest of your life because it's capturing that moment. And a couple of other people have been saying, basically, can they go on a shoot with you? A friend of mine, Christian, who is a photographer, but I dive with, he's like, yeah, I'd like to go on a shoot with her. So there's a lot of those kind of things. But look,
it's like you have a couple more dates lined up.
Yeah, I think so. that Matt Murphy guy was pretty keen. Matt, we've opened Pandora's box. It's up to you to try and get that ticket to Tahiti.
Maybe you should invite her to Tahiti.
Actually, yeah. How about that, Matt? Come on, step up. Yeah.
flip the coin. No, it's funny. I get a lot of people who approach me to come, like they want me to take them on shoots, and there's been very, very few people I've let that happen over the last few years because it's tricky. Especially if I set up a shoot with athletes and then you got someone else who's there suddenly taking photos as well. It's like, well, hold a minute. I've gone to the effort of setting this up. Like, I'm sorry, like I can't let you take photos because this is my shoot. So that's when it can be a bit of a conflict, particularly young photographers who are trying to establish themselves. Others who are like want the experience, then yeah, I've taken along the odd person, but sometimes that can be, it's tough because I've taken someone to like, hey, come with me on a road trip in the States. I found this young photographer in the States, so I was like, you know what, you've been emailing me for a year, why not come with me for a week? And it was great, and I know I gave her an incredible experience, but I was so stressed out. I had overwhelmed myself that it was, I had to remind myself to not do that because then I feel responsible for them, and it's I need to balance that out a bit better. But I'm not opposed to taking people on shoots. It's just doesn't happen too often.
What about running a course or masterclass or something like that? Because the knowledge that you have in terms of you're shaking your head already.
I can't be fucked.
Okay. No, cool. I like it. I'm lazy. I'm like, there's plenty of other photographers who do that. I don't want to market that sort of shit. It's like, I don't know. I get on podcasts, speak my mind. Hopefully someone takes a golden nugget away and we're good. That's cool. That's cool. I think that's a great way to be. I think it's really hyper impressive to see where your career has gone, though. I mean, to see where you are. I mean, I think anyone that manages to get out of Australia and go over and sort of crack on the door and knock on, kick down the door of Nat Geo and, become a master of this and that, the other, shoot with the people that you shot with. I think people in Australia, geographically, you get put in a hole. A lot of the time by North America, you get put in a hole, and you have broken that down, and that is amazing. I've had experiences where, having done trips and this, that, the other, speaking to Nat Geo, post it, and they're like, oh, I wish we knew about it beforehand. It's like, well, actually, we got in contact with you beforehand, but no one took any notice because we're down under in Australia. You've really got to be in their face, and you've done that so well.
Well, now things have changed, though, with the Disney takeover and... Yeah, that's interesting. That's another conversation for another time.
Okay, that's another couple of drinks there. So let's probably wrap up. Lauren, is there anything that you needed to say or anything else you had to ask? Question.
Just wanted to thank you so much for rolling with an unconventional conversation. I think it's really nice to connect with you, and I hope we can connect again over some beers around a campfire and hopefully in Tasmania, because our world has been just like you. When you chase an unconventional life, we are in the flux of COVID and figuring out where we're going to go. So we haven't really announced this, but it's looking like we're going to be moving to Tasmania for a year, and I'm going to dive into farming, permaculture, viticulture, since adventure and travel is off the cards. So I'm really excited about that, and would love to share a beer or a wine down there if this next year, in terms of, and we can have just some space to be quiet as well.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, that would be fun, because I think there is something about bringing these virtual connections to real life. I'm missing that, so that would be amazing to make that work.
Yeah, no, look, I
definitely
really appreciate your time. I mean, you've been super honest.
That's all good.
And it's been really cool. It's been gnarly. It's been nice to connect with you, because I've followed your career for a while, and it's like, Krystle and everyone, Watto's talked about you, other people like Rob Norman, all this, that, the other, and like, yeah, it's nice to...
Rob too.
Yeah, it's a smaller world than we think.
Small world.
It really is.
Yeah, no, I've known about you guys for years. I feel bad though, because I was like, oh shit, I wasn't following you on Instagram. I suck at that stuff. I was like,
we
really suck at it, so don't worry, you're good.
There we go. We can all suck at it together. But,
yeah.
No, it's small because obviously I'm trying to think when I first heard about you, and I don't know, was the Antarctic expedition or before that? Don't know. It was a while back. So. Anyways, It's amazing that we haven't crossed paths before.
Yeah, no, but it's good. I mean, you've just been travelling too much, sort of 11 months out of 12 of the year. Look, we've got to ask the probably final question. Who should we have in your seat, the hot seat? Who's another adventure thinking out there that we should ask questions of and harass?
Like I know you said Sarah Marquis, so that's an easy one. But, and Sarah, I don't mean to, like, this is someone else I think you should talk to as well. Of course, yeah, Sarah would be wonderfully sassy. But I think you guys would get a really kick out of talking to my friends Tom de Dolodor and Sofia Pinheiro. Did she change her last name yet? I don't know. Anyways, Tom, he's basically like a brother to me. We met on that Pakistan expedition. We've done a few projects now over the years, going back to Pakistan, Colombia, over in Europe. And he has how old is Jack? Jack's like 1.5 years old now, and they've just been living on a boat, sailed across the Atlantic and back. So I feel like both him and Sophia, have very similar challenges with trying to raise a family in the outdoor space and still doing some major expeditions. And yeah, I just think that would be wonderful to have on the podcast.
That sounds super cool. I mean, that's one of our like fantasies as a family, to do the whole sort of sailing thing with kids and stuff. So hook us up.
School of Life.
We need to learn how to sail first, though.
Yeah.
Minor detail.
Yeah. That's what they did. They spent a couple of years just building their skills, and next thing you know, they've sailed across the Atlantic. I was like, holy shit.
I think you just got to wing it, right? That's what we learned.
Just wing it. No weather reports. Just go out there. That's basically what Jess Watson said as well last week.
That's where the beauty happens.
There is a beauty to not overplanning. There really is.
There is. Actually, sorry, someone else you should reach out to. Oh, gosh, what's her name? There was a film of her. When did I see that? It was in Bilbao. She's a lady who wanted to bike and kayak her way around the world. She's British. Sarah, I'm struggling to think of her last name. But my friend Jen Randall did a film about her and that trip, and it's one of the most honest portrayals that I've seen about someone who's been trying to go around the world.
Oh, hi, Sarah Outen.
Yeah,
Sarah Outen. Yeah, Sarah Outen.
That's it.
Yeah. I actually have. I've been messaging with her. I was going to ask her. So Sarah, this is preempting me actually asking you formally. But we've got a book in Morgan's room, which is a kid's book by Alistair Humphreys, and it's got Greatest Adventurers, and there's this part on Sarah and Sarah's journey. And Morgan, for whatever reason, one of her boats is named Happy Socks, that she rode across, I think, the Pacific. And Morgan, whenever she hears that, she just breaks up into hysterical laughter. And
she'll flick through this book and just find the picture of her rowing in the boat and be like, Happy Socks! She loves it.
Loves it. And so I shot a video of Morgan going nuts over Happy Socks and sent it to Sarah, and she sent back this nice message back, and it was really cool. So she's awesome, and that I haven't watched Home yet, but I really, really want to. Yeah,
I really recommend it. It's been one of my favorite adventure films because I've seen so many now over the years thanks to the festivals, and you realize how quickly and how hard it is to find films with an actual good story or like it's been done well.
They get very samey, a lot of adventure films. You're like, it's just beautifully shot and this, that, the other, but it's like there's something lacking in the story, or it's just, I've seen this before, there's nothing different. But Sarah's, I've heard that about Sarah's one.
It. Thank you for those recommendations. That's
awesome recommendations. Look, can you just stay on for 1 second? We're just going to wrap up really quickly, and then we'll jump back to you. Is that cool, Krystle?
Yeah, it's all good.
All right.
She's like, can you please
let me go? That's what she's thinking. All right, well...
Oh, no.
Thank you so much to Krystle. I think we've got to go over to that camera there now, Lauren. Oh, no. What's going on? Oh, there you are. You can just peek over my shoulder. This is the thing about a live show. Here we go.
This has been one random conversation.
This has been
Thanks
one
for hanging
super
in there.
random conversation. An awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Epic.
Love it.
Epic. Like, just the honesty. I really, really appreciate it, and I love randomness, and I love random chats, and going in. She's a person that speaks to my own heart. Just that sort of nature.
I think that she's finding her own path, and that's messy and beautiful, and that really resonates, which is awesome. And it's not always it's everyone's a shit show in their own way at certain times. I think we try to show that without being overly unprofessional.
Oh, yeah, good one. Unprofessional. So next week, anyway, so we've got a super, super cool guest next week. His name is Paul Pritchard, and Paul is a good friend of ours. Paul is he's based actually down in Tassie. And so Paul, back in the day, was probably one of the cutting edge climbers, rock climbers. Actually,
you should see the pictures from him in his climbing suit in the 80s. Maybe we should put that up.
We'll find them and put them up. But like in the 80s, he's like
sweet 80s style.
Great style, great pants, you know, smoking cigarettes on the wall and this, that, the other. I think they were sponsored by a cigarette company back then because he could be. and then unfortunately, Paul had an accident where he was climbing the totem pole down in Tasmania, and a rock the size of a laptop or a computer fell down and struck him in the head. Now that's you know, made Paul's life very hard. It's caused him sort of a severe sort of difficulties getting around and whatnot, but he hasn't allowed that to stop him. You know, he's probably more adventurous than us, and
he actually did a similar trip that we did across the outback.
It was cycling with a group of disabled athletes, you know, to show that, you know, you shouldn't let a disability stop you from pursuing things. And he
definitely hasn't lost his sense of humor.
He's probably the funniest guy I know, actually, in reality. So it's going to be a cracker of a chat. He's amazing. He's also the reason why we didn't meet Megan and Harry. Yeah, thanks Paul Pritchard for pipping us in that award in the 2018.
He won the Spirit of Adventure award. We came a closer far second to Paul. So anyway, but if you do have some thoughts on who you want on, there's the email, sort of the link down below. Send us a note, catch us on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and give us your suggestions, because we can reach out to people and give it a shot, and you can be part of the conversation. And thank you, Krystle Wright, for talking about stubbornness and all of the complexities.
And yeah, just random dating stories. I loved it. All right. Till next week.
Okay.